a meeting, and even though he sends an email out to everyone about today's show, saying it's 8 a.m. No, it's actually 8:30. So
You
apologies.
finally got the email to work, and then you
I
decide
finally got it to work,
on the day
and
you get it out there. Oh no, I'm sorry,
no,
everybody. I
yeah.
apologize on
That's
Steve's
that's
behalf.
that's just funny. Thank you, and in some way, like your good self, Mike, I'll find some way to blame you for the reason for
Yeah.
all this being delayed. But I haven't
Oh,
got
it's
there
definitely
quite
my
yet.
fault.
I haven't
Definitely my
quite got
fault.
there just yet, but we'll get there. We'll get there. So, look, welcome everybody. As you know, we typically do go live at 8 a.m., and we're here to talk about the key topics of the day, all around work, workplace productivity, and the employee experience. And the whole point of this is to bring content that Mike and I find useful, have a little conversation, share some of our thoughts, and also but provide you through the emails and through the links below access to the content that we're finding and what we think people are talking about and going to be talking about today. So again, also link below if you want to receive that email. Just click on it, enter your details, and you'll receive that each morning. And I'll do my best to keep you informed of the times where everything goes through. So who are we? My name is Steve Todd. I'm the founder of Open Source Workplace. I'm also Global Head of Workplace at NASDAQ. My co-host, Mr. Mike Petresky, host of the Workplace Innovator podcast. So there we go, Mike. How you doing, man? How are
And
you doing?
global head of nothing,
Global
but
Head
that's
of
okay.
Nothing, man. You come on, come on. You,
Podcast extraordinaire, podcaster
there you
extraordinaire.
are.
Hey, yeah, it's a crazy Wednesday. It's a busy day. This is going to
Yeah,
throw us off, but that's
I know.
okay. I need this conversation, Steve, to get me going
I
because I
know.
have my live stream for an hour at noon Eastern today. Check out Workplace Innovator interactive live stream by going to workplaceinnovator.com. And we have a great conversation scheduled today. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today will be a good little primer for me
Awesome.
as I prepare and sound like I
So
know what I'm talking about. So thank you,
love
sir.
it, love it, love it, love it. So what are we going to be talking about today? Well, good that you should ask. So we're going to be talking about some data-driven culture. How do you look at data? 5 tips from our good friend, Mr. John Schultz. We're going to talk about, home office, corporate offices. What are the differences? How do we manage those things? We're going to talk about co-working space, and we're going to talk about or change management and workplace strategy. What are the differences? So hang around, folks. And as I said, it's the links below will provide you information about everything we're going to talk about today. So, Mike, just moving straight in. Here we have Mr. John Schultz, 5 tips for creating a data-driven culture for your business. And John, obviously, he's a friend of the show. We've done many interviews. He's a great insight. He's a really good friend and
Yeah.
immensely bright guy. And he shares a lot of this information on his website, johnschultz.com. So please do go check it out. But what he's sort of trying to say here is, there's a lot of data that we use for external information. And you're a marketing guy, right? You know how you evaluate your numbers. You look at those
Hmm.
numbers, you then take it and allows you to adjust strategies or create new strategies. And through this, he's encouraging folks to go back, have a look at their data, bring data together, and in this new environment, ask different questions and actually bring the team together to look at it. But he's also highlighting a really important point. Organizations are typically quite good at analyzing the external data, so information that's going to clients. What we're perhaps not so good at is looking at the internal information. So what's the data points that are really relevant for teams to be productive? How has that changed as we've moved through this pandemic? And is there insights that we can see from some of those data points looking forward? So, for example, if work is going to change or their team's going to change, is there data sets in there that we can look and we can evaluate and get the team involved to do it? So, it really was great insights.
Yeah, all I'll say on this one, Steve, is I am a marketing guy, and data is important, and it's something that I'm certainly mindful of and aware of. But I hate numbers. You know me. I'm the opposite of you. I'm not a numbers guy. Excel spreadsheets make me cringe. I lose sleep. So what John said it was very, I guess, important that he recognized the fact that many people aren't data driven, or at least not naturally so, like myself. So I like to see the the outcomes that data can help us
Yeah.
achieve, and I like to be directed by data, but getting into the numbers and figuring it out myself is not my thing. So he gave some practical tips to help workplace leaders make data more appealing to your
Yeah.
team and make people that may not naturally be interested in diving into those numbers understand the value there. And I appreciated that.
Yeah, and I would also encourage people to go back and have a look at some historical data. As we think about workplace today, and we think about what workplace will be in the future, is there data sets we can go back and evaluate? And today, to evaluate that information, we're going to ask different questions to perhaps what we were looking or asking before. And perhaps there's some hidden gems in there. So I'd encourage people to go back and have a look. And it's certainly something I'm doing on a regular basis. So next we have an article, Mike, that you sent through, which is interesting, blurring the lines between home and the corporate office. And obviously, we talk at length on this show about actually where does the content come from, who's creating the content, and is there a slant on this? And this is an interior design website that's actually talking about obviously interior design and sort of correlating that with the home office and the corporate office. But even in these articles, as we look through through the lens of that filter, there's always some really, really major points that are really worth discussing, considering, and that's highlighting, and that's why we're actually bringing this in today. So as we think about it, right, so the home office, is it a necessity, is it a nice to have? And we talk about, today there's a 90% increase in the amount of accessories that people are buying for their home office equipment. So people are thinking about this in the long term. So people are considering, okay, I'm going to be in this for a while. We know that. We've discussed that at length. And therefore, I need to make adjustments to my home. So as corporate real estate leaders, how do we think about that? As we think about, planners and so on and so forth, is there things that we can be doing? Is there information we can be sharing with our teams to actually help them make more informed decisions about maybe purchases they're going to have? And that's where it then flows on to the second piece of the second point raised here. The home office cannot be designed inferior to the corporate office, right? Yes, this is as an interior design company trying to sell, products and so on and so forth, but the point isn't lost. Office furniture is purchased for the absolute, with the whole objective of allowing employees to be productive, right? So that's why money is spent on really good desks, really good chairs, providing really good monitors and other equipment. We can't expect people to work from home, sitting at the kitchen table, on a stool, be it whatever it is, 24/7 or however long they need to do it, and not sort of suffer consequences. So we need to be bringing that in, bringing the concepts from the office to the home.
Right.
And the last point I thought was really interesting, and this was referenced back to a Cushman & Wakefield study that they did. And yes, we can talk about Cushman & Wakefield, and we know, right, this is a real estate company. But again, it's some of the thread that actually is really important. And they're actually noting that the younger folks want flexibility. They're also suggesting that the older generation, so people in the 50s or 60s, want to get back to the office. That surprised me a little bit. And then obviously it's based on a lot of studies that they've done. And there's a link to the study as well in the material that we've provided below. I actually thought it would have been not the opposite, because millennials, I do expect them to want flexibility. I actually thought that, those folks in their 40s, 50s, 60s would be more akin to wanting that flexibility in working from home and not going to the office all the time. Pre-pandemic, the average person that worked as a remote employee was 55. So that sort of speaks to the individual type who would actually be working from home. So this surprised me, and I thought this was an interesting data point as well.
Yeah, it just goes to show you can't make sweeping statements about the generations. But the point, that last point being the one that jumped out off the page to me, the millennial who was interviewed about his 60-something-year-old father who's anxious to get back to work while he is excited to continue as a flexible remote worker. And the data and the research that Cushman referred to was one of those paradoxes, right? It's like the idea that 70 to 80% of millennial and Gen Z respondents want to continue working from home at least part of the time and want to have that flexibility. Yet that's the same group that struggles at home because they're in smaller spaces. They don't have their big house yet. They're sharing with roommates. They have to manage, network connectivity problems and shared bandwidth and all those challenges. They don't have a separate office like the guy's dad probably does if he's got the space for it, of course. So it was an interesting paradox of the workplace and this new workplace we're dealing with. A couple other real quick points that came to mind from this article, again, about setting up properly at home offices. If we're going to be functioning this way for the long time to come, furniture is important, and the quality of that furniture and the quality of the setup. And it's something that people are now certainly considering if they hadn't before. And will organizations fund that? Will they take some of their budget and say you can buy better quality commercial grade furniture for your home offices since you're going to be working there 2 or 3 days a week? The other piece that is interest to me, of course, in my community. Last week it came up on the live stream. One of our FM practitioners said, who's responsible for buying that furniture? It's usually the facility manager or someone in that role. So all of this converges into an interesting, real practical need to address this extension of the workplace now being in our homes. It's not remote work versus office work. It's this hybrid approach. And then how will leaders manage it is the question going forward.
Yeah, and it's just sort of dovetailing a little bit and sort of addressing some of the points you raised there. I think it's a really tough thing for individuals to buy the right equipment without clear guidance. And I think if you think about a chair, right, the chair that you sit in your office has been tested against many other chairs in the industry, and the organization has selected that chair that you sit on because they've decided that chair is the best ergonomically, is the best, it's the most durable, and actually is the most value over the long term. Same thing for the desk, same thing for everything else so you sit around within the office. So I think it's a real challenge for individuals to receive a stipend and say, go buy a chair for yourself, to actually then go and select the right product. Yes, there is information out there on the web, but again, it's what's the motivation for the people who are selling it? They're trying to sell products. So I actually think that the more information that we as workplace leaders can provide to staff and guidance we can provide to staff on, here are our recommendations, here's the reasons why, then I think the better everybody is. And I almost think we need to get to a point where we're providing them with a package. And that package may be different if you're going to be a full-time employee at home, or if you're going to be someone who's going to be working from home a couple of days a week. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all unfolds. And different companies will take different approaches, Mike.
Yeah, what is your company doing out there, folks? Let us know in the comments and send us an email or tell us about, what you'd like to see going forward. That's always an interesting perspective. I want to hear from you.
Yeah, and you take that's the whole point of this open source workplace, right? It's open source, it's for us all to share and learn from each other. So one area that's really interesting to me, Mike, is the co-working space. And whenever the pandemic hit, there was a lot of stress, a lot of negative information, a lot of negative press about co-working. What's the future of co-working? And I was one. And I sort of then sat back and I thought about, co-working providers that provide individual spaces. So where one person can go in and be in an enclosed room, feel safe, feel secure. As we went through COVID, the more and more I thought about this, the more I thought, actually, that may be the best solution going forward for individuals that need to get out of their home, who want a secure place where they can go, feel safe, close the door. They can bring their drinks, they can bring their coffee, they can take the lunch with them, and you don't have to be there for the whole day, but if there's important meetings you want to take, or there's head down work you want to get done, I sort of thought about it, and I thought co-working actually could come back in a really strong way. Where I do have concerns is where you have co-working operators where you may have a large team group that is there, but actually you share with other team members or other companies, and that's where things get a little more complicated. So here we have two articles, the Economic Times and then the Commercial Property Executive, and I've brought them both together because they actually make good points in the sense they actually see real opportunities here for co-working locations and the sector as a whole. I don't know whether you've given thought to this, or whether you've heard within your network or folks that you talk with, how you think co-working is going to sort of impact the workplace, its uses for organizations, as we come out or work through this pandemic.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that perspective of your initial reaction when COVID hit, and the feeling that, boy, this is unfortunate. Co-working spaces are really going to suffer. Those companies are really not going to be able to deal with this situation. And the article addresses some of those things about, their lease obligations and some of the challenges they faced, and their members or their tenants deferring lease payments. But the financial side piece aside, it depends on what you think of co-working, what you think of co-working space or flexible office is all about. And I've learned a lot over the last couple of years by thankfully having the privilege of interviewing some of these leaders at some of the co-working companies out there. And, so I knew that the model for co-working was not what I initially thought it was. And I guess so depending on, your perspective there, that's not what I initially thought co-working was. The idea of having a one office in a co-working space where you can go in and have that private setting. My understanding of co-working and flexible workspaces was all about this community they were building. The WeWork model of work, play, live, and it was this place you go to interact with others, those you don't know about, those that aren't with your organization per se, but with other companies that you could find connections, and all those great things that we again tried to model in our organizations. The benefits of creating those work environments that cause community to happen, and therefore creativity and innovation is sparked. That was the concept, right? But I think what you alluded to is the real practical application of co-working, and as big corporate entities were taking advantage of co-working spaces. It was, and you would know this better than anyone because you're a practitioner in this, but you would seek out co-working spaces to deal with that piece of your real estate portfolio. You needed to be flexible. You didn't want a long-term commitment for them. You were scaling up for a project or what have you. So it's about defining terms, but it may be about the industry redefining its value in the mind of workplace leaders or real estate executives or the general public, because your perception of this whole thing, just like the media, bias towards WeWork and all my friends who are outside of our workplace industry, they don't know what co-working is. They took all their information about co-working based on the media reports around the WeWork situation. So much like Kate Lister referred to last week, the way that the New York Times talks about remote work or teleworking versus, return to office planning, those biases, that kind of superficial bubblegum media portrayal of things is not all that's there to be seen, and it takes a deeper dive, doesn't it?
You're absolutely 100% right, and it's funny when I speak to flexible office operators. They don't like
That's
to
what they
use
prefer
the
to be
term.
called.
They don't like to use the term co-working for the reasons that you articulated. But I think you hit the nail on the head, right, in a sense of what your perception of what co-working is. I think that's what it's going to be in the future. I think it will be used as that flexible office, that flexible where you're at home and an organization gives you the ability to go and use a space close to your home or wherever you are, and you basically go and you use it for a defined period of time, whatever you think you need, or you bring your team together in these spaces, and I think there is a real opportunity, and I've spoke at length on the channel. I've spoken interviews with Mark Galbraith of Liquid Space, and sort of our views and discussing some of these opportunities that actually are in play today. So it's great, and I think look, it's co-working. If you have views on it, share your views. Let us know. And one of the other things I want to mention, Mike, if people are listening, if you come across content that you think, or you create content and you want to share it with us, send us an email, oswdaily@gmail.com, and we'll try and incorporate it into the show as we go forward. And then awesome. the last one. Trying to get my buttons all right, Mike, to throw this up at the right place. There's a lot of things.
Where's the executive producer when we need him?
I know, right? Mr. Alec Dinkoff is probably sleeping nicely on the West Coast at the moment. I hope he is as well. So this actually, Mike, this comes from my good friend Christina Herrera. This is a article that we wrote around a couple of interviews we did with Christina, all around workplace strategy, change management, what the differences are, and how do you take advantage of these processes during a time of a crisis, right? A time of a crisis being the pandemic. And Christina Herrera obviously wonderfully articulates the difference between workplace strategy, change management, and it's
doing it with a great Sydney Australian accent.
There you
too.
go, man.
Talk
There
about
you
your
go.
accent. That's appealing. That's one of them right there.
Yeah. And it's the sort of, as we think about what everyone's going to be going through today, right? All organizations, all workplace leaders are trying to evaluate what is our workplace strategy in the future. How do we do that? And there's a number of things that Christina mentions about what is important, right? So you think about the culture, you think about the goals, you think about the habits, you think about the patterns of your organization. Every organization is unique. Every location or office within an organization is unique. And each of those have their own culture, have their own goals, have their own habits, have their own patterns. And part of our responsibility as workplace leaders is to really understand those so that we can then effect a change and run a change management process to deliver those goals for the organization. And there's many things that Christina raises through this article. So it is a great read, and I encourage people to go and take a read. And it's an open source workplace, so why wouldn't you?
There you go. Your source for comprehensive coverage. No, it's great stuff, and I've enjoyed getting to know Christina, and she's been a guest on my podcast and on my live stream, and always appreciate her insight and her perspectives. And the thing I always take away, and it's a deep dive article, which is based on a number of conversations, which has been great. Yeah. And that's what Open Source Workplace does really well, is you have these multiple interviews, and then your team will put it together in a really comprehensive type piece of content that's valuable to all of us. So thank you for that, Steve.
No, thank you for saying so.
But Christina especially has this strategic perspective, a mind around change management and expertise, and an understanding of the fact that workplaces and office settings, and now in this new pandemic life, the combination of workplaces wherever we may be, and however we're adapting to our COVID-19 existence, she understands that it takes a understanding of the individual organization, the differences between how culture plays into things, and what the objective is, what the business outcome you're looking for, because workplace is a tool to meet those objectives. And she clearly articulates this in so many ways, and the way she approaches things she recognizes the value of data and sensors and understanding about occupancy and all those things that go on with a typical workplace, but she also understands the value of the human side, and observing and asking questions, and really getting to the bottom of why do you do what you do. And I really enjoyed that about her, which it doesn't just come to looking at the surface level information and saying, let's make a decision on this. It's let's take a deeper dive. In fact, let's take 2 or 3 times the effort to understand the meaning behind the behavior. And then that's what helps to create a great change management program. So highly recommend her research and her perspective. Christina Herrera is great.
She is, and thank you for saying all that. And so the only thing I will add on is we sort of think about, we talk about workplace strategy, and we think of workplace, and we think of the physical environment of workplace. Today, we have to consider that actually the home office is part of that environment. So it's how does that then get integrated into that workplace strategy and then that change management process. And as we think about, okay, so what is that future of the workplace? There's going to be a change management process that needs to go from everyone being at home to maybe not everyone being in the office, but some people have been back in the office. And then there's going to be this hybrid model as people move back and forth. There has to be a change management process, an education process, defining of, ways to work, programs, policies, all those different things that need to be put together. So, do take a read, because things have changed, and do all we can and try to do all we can to provide ourselves with information so that we can better serve the organizations that we represent as we move forward.
And I don't know, I didn't pay you for that promo, Steve, but that was a perfect lead into what today's live stream's about. We actually have marketed it. My two guests are HR and change management experts that are going to address this topic of the remote workplace and adapting to this holistic view of employee engagement and experience, not just in offices and return to office and all the things we're concerned about with safety and feeling comfortable there, but how can we just face the reality that many of us will be working from home for a long time to come, and what practical advice do they have to help us better manage that holistic view of work and the workplace, because remote work and our homes are going to be part of that going forward. So thank you for that, Steve.
I wish I'd known. I could have sent the link out to everybody, and everybody would have had something else to do in the meantime with been late today. But if you're watching, give us a thumbs up. It really helps the program. It really helps the channel. It really helps, be it Facebook, be it YouTube, wherever you are. It really helps us tell their algorithms that hey, this might be interesting for other people. So do help us, and please give us a thumbs up. But for today, Mike, thank you. Appreciate your time as always. Thank you for your flexibility today. And again, my apologies to everybody watching that I did get things a little wrong today. And you've got a different Mickey Mouse because you're got a gray one today.
Cheers, mate. Yes, I got my Mickey Mouse, my daily Mickey for you.
There you
Have a good one.
All right, cheers, mate. Take care. Bye.